Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast, hosted by Alison Humphries. The Recruitment Leadership Podcast is here to help those in the recruitment industry gain awareness and understanding on the hot topics faced by those in the business of hiring people. In each episode, Alison Humphries is joined by a fellow expert to offer professional knowledge, insight and advice on the biggest subjects affecting recruitment businesses. It's the podcast to listen to for recruitment business frontrunners seeking expert information from industry-leading advisors. Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. This is Alison Humphries of Recruitment Leadership. Thanks for joining us. And this is another in the current season focused on candidate shortages and what we can do about them from various perspectives. Now, I'm very pleased to be joined today by James Ball of AdBuilder. Welcome, James.
Hello, Alison.
Hi. James is actually has owned and run recruitment businesses himself. And so this is very much a broadcast for those of you who want actionable, specific advice that you can literally turn into candidates and therefore, we hope, profit as soon as we finish the podcast today. James owned and ran Coburg Banks, an IT recruitment business, and subsequently moved to set up AdBuilder. So perhaps, James, it would be best for you to explain your journey. Why did the world need AdBuilder?
Well, blimey, the journey is quite a big one. As you say, 20 years ago, we started the recruitment business, and it was just at the start, really, of online recruitment as well. And job boards were really just kicking off around about then. And over the years, I think one of the biggest problems we had was controlling the advert output that our consultants would write. Everyone had their own way of doing things and their own unique style. And typically in recruitment, everyone's a bit of a maverick. And it was very difficult to police and control the output that individuals would have. We'd get job boards coming into us, they'd present to us. Everyone would sit there furiously writing notes and nodding. And you think, yeah, they've got it. And they go back to their desk and they just carry on doing it the way they'd always done it. And as the business owner who was spending quite a bit of money on job board advertising, it was really frustrating because you could see the output and you had very little control over it. And then consequently, we saw application rates were nosediving and we weren't filling roles that we thought we should be filling. If you checked sort of rankings on job boards, we were very low down. And it became so tricky for us that we actually broke the whole process down into a number of structures and frameworks to get our heads around how we could actually make the whole thing work better for our consultants. And the long story short is that over the journey, we decided that there had to be an easier way of making it a simpler task for our consultants to actually write an advert without having to really give it much thought or much consideration, but whilst at the same time getting the optimization piece correct. And that was the seed and the thought for AdBuilder. It started off as a tool for us. It solved our problem. And we thought, well, if we've got that problem, then others must have the same problem as well. So we spent a bit of money and a bit of time coding it up and making a software platform out of it.
Right, and you've now been running AdBuilder as a standalone business since April 2017, so nearly 5 years. And just give us an idea how many recruitment businesses you have supported in that time, or are you currently, whichever way is easiest to answer the question.
Probably around about 450 at the moment. So, I mean, they vary in size. We've got lots of one-man bands, and I think the challenges for one-man bands are time related. You know, they're very pressed for time. And then we've got, the other end, we've got 100 consultant agencies as well, who their challenge is different as well, where they're trying to get people off LinkedIn Recruiter and to start engaging more in job advertising again. And the challenge for them is that I think their recruiters just can't be bothered to write a good ad, to be honest. So they wanted a tool to try and make that process much easier. But yeah, we've got a big mix of clients and different needs in between.
Thank you. Yeah, you made some really interesting points earlier. One was about the expense, and we're recording this at the end of February. It's been all over the recruiter sphere, if that's a thing, that certain job boards have significantly increased their charges or are in the process of doing that. And what's interesting, I noticed on a couple of WhatsApp groups that I'm part of, is that first of all, people have a knee-jerk reaction, which is, I'm just going to negotiate really hard and I'll just move to other job boards. But actually, I can't blame the job boards for increasing their charges. They've gone from a total of 1.2 million job adverts live in February 21 to 3.6 million in February 22. That's REC data. The cost of providing that infrastructure is real for them. And they're thinking, well, hang on a minute, we can make the same profit with potentially fewer users, fewer jobs. And that's just good business. So what I think has perhaps got to come home for some recruiters as yet is that there is highly likely to be a domino effect, isn't there? Where other job boards will now probably collect a few more subscribers and then increase their charges. And the same might well go for the currently free iterations of LinkedIn and so on and so forth. So instead of rearranging the deck chairs on Titanic here, it's really important to actually look, as you say, James, at what we're putting out there. There is no point in spending a fortune with a marketing consultancy to produce high quality content marketing if your recruiters are then producing terrible copy and even, not very literate copy in adverts, which are doing just as much or as little for your brand as the content marketing is. So there's an important point there. And at the same time, I do meet a lot of perhaps rather inexperienced recruiters who think that everything online is free. They actually believe that. So if you're thinking that, listeners, please disabuse yourself now. Now, do stay tuned on this because James has created some really valuable PDFs for listeners to download after this, and we'll give you a link at the end to tell you where you can find those. But I think there's a general acceptance that while the costs may be going up, the returns on traditional job board advertising, if we don't look at it again, are decreasing quite rapidly. There's just so many adverts out there. People expect very little in the way of results and just regard it as a sort of given cost of doing business. Over to you, James. What do you think are the most common issues with job ads that you see today in a climate where we really need to maximise candidate engagement with them?
Well, I think the days of just putting anything online, as you just said, and hoping you get a response are dead. I think we had some stats through from CV Library a few weeks back, and around about 40% of all traffic won't go past page one. And if you think about that, if there's only 25 jobs on page one, and you think about the competition for jobs being so high and a candidate scarce market as it is, if you were to just get a job spec from a client, copy and paste it, which a lot of agencies still do, and then send it out, then you might as well set fire to your recruitment budget. In terms of the most common issues I see within sort of writing a job ad, there's probably four main areas really. And the first one's job title. And that's picking, I know it sounds really, really obvious, but it's picking a job title that's actually going to get searched. There's so many companies I come across who will take a job title from a client, an internal job spec, and they just use that without giving any kind of thought or consideration as to who is my target hire, what do they look like, how do they think, what do they say, and most importantly, what are they physically typing into a job search to find my job? And that's got to be the title that you use for your job advert. And you talked about one of the PDF guides, and one of them is specifically talks about how to choose the right job title. We've built a whole framework around it because there is a science to it. But if you think backwards, if your job isn't even going to get found, then it's dead before it even starts. Probably the second area that I see lots of companies falling down with is optimization. And again, a failing, if you just take a job spec from a client and copy and paste it, you haven't optimized it, and you need to optimize it around the job title that you've just selected. So there is a science to that as well. You're meant to contextually mention a job title 4, 5, 6 times within an advert, but it has to be contextual, not spammed. And if you do that, then and do it correctly, then you should end up hopefully in the top 3 or 4 spots on a job search. So that's super, super, super important, and making sure that the job title matches to the thing you've optimized around. Again, I know how obvious that sounds, but just get that absolutely spot on. The third area is structure. It's thinking like a job seeker. So 70% of all traffic goes on a mobile these days. And if you think about a mobile view, 2/3 of that view is taken up with job board information. So it'll be job title, location, salary, and you've probably got space for a couple of sentences at the bottom of that page. If you don't think about your opening lines of a job advert and how it engages your target hire, then you're making a huge mistake. And if you have to start thinking about, from a candidate's perspective, what's in it for me. Don't talk about the hiring company first. They want to know what's in it for them, what they're going to get paid, where they're working, whether they're right for the role. And we adopt a principle of nodding and scrolling, and it's inbuilt into everything AdBuilder does. So the idea being that you see it, you nod, you scroll, nod a bit more, keep scrolling until eventually you click on the apply button. So yeah, those are 3 main areas. And the fourth aspect is clarity. I mean, you need to be really clear and really explicit about salary and location. Never, ever post an advert without a salary. You'll instantly lose 50% of your response if you do. And again, it's thinking about what the job seeker needs to see, these trust indicators, to actually get them to send you their CV. I mean, think of the CV as being like currency. You know, you need to be able to give them something for them to give you something. And if they have any uncertainty about what the job is doing or what it's paying, then you won't get a CV from them. And also, it's come to light recently, particularly around kind of working from home and flexible working conditions. Be explicit about the location that the individual is working in. And that will also boost engagement and responses. And I genuinely think if you concentrate in those 4 areas and get them right, and you'll maximize candidate engagement.
Okay, that's a brilliant answer. And I'm so glad you mentioned this issue of salary. So I've been quoting this at people for years, that at least a realistic range, if not a precise number, is absolutely critical to encourage people to respond, and actually to make sure that the people who do respond are broadly in the right bracket. There are a couple of other urban myths that have grown up that I hear often repeated, but I'm going to take the opportunity to check them with you because you clearly know what you're talking about. The first is that the magic number for optimization of repeating your key search terms is 7. Is that true?
Well, we don't do 7. We do 4 or 5, depending on the version that you choose. And we've got a video actually on the website showing the optimization in practice for, I think the term is senior recruitment consultant. And I would always say to someone, go and do a nationwide search of that job title, see how popular it is. That's the one you use. And that one was something like 3,000 for the country, and the AdBuilder built Advert was 6th in the whole country. So when you then refine that down to the location, it was top. And I think that I got 4 or 5. I think, to be honest, the variation, it varies between job boards. So, 7 sounds like a magic number. I think having 4, 5, 6, 7 probably won't make a huge difference, but just get it in. We go for 4 or 5. We've done that because over many years of split testing it and trying it worked for us, and that's what we do. But yeah, it is super important. And I think part of the problem is that as a recruiter, if you sit there with a blank sheet of paper thinking, what am I going to write for the advert? It's so tempting to just pull out a job spec and copy it in, or copy an old advert and use chunks of text you've used before. The problem with that is that you then have to go through the piece if you're going to do the job properly, and you've then got to shoehorn the job title in somehow to kind of make it work. And that becomes quite a manual, laborious task for the recruiter who just wants to get on with the next thing and not particularly sort of give this much care and attention. And that's why adverts invariably then fail or don't work like they should.
Yeah, brilliant. So just to summarise your 4 key headings, they were get the job title right, they were structure, optimization, and clarity.
Yeah, definitely. Get that. There are four major things. I mean, there's so many facets to it, but you get those bits right, and everything will just slot into place.
Yeah. And a very interesting point you made about the first 2 lines. We need to be selling the opportunity in those first 2 lines, not waiting to the bottom, yeah, because of the way things are displayed. So a really good point there about the mobile view. Okay. Now, way back when, in the mid-1980s, when I was in recruitment initially, we were reliant on press advertising, actual papers. And not only did that mean that you had to wait at least a week before your copy appeared in print, and then wait for people to read it and type something and post it to you and so forth, but it also meant that it was a sort of one-off. People could only see it if they read that copy of the publication. It cost a fortune, an absolute fortune. So I can remember when the Sunday Times, had a great big appointments section. I'm sure you're not old enough to remember that. Anyway, great big broadsheet size appointments section. And this figure, people don't believe me, but listen up, guys. 1/8 of a page in that Sunday Times appointments section was £15,000 for a one-off hit. Absolutely staggering. Now, perhaps because it was so damned expensive and you had such a limited exposure, to be fair, people actually did take a lot of care about what went into their copy, rather than just rushing to get something up on the boards. So I think the relatively low cost and ease of posting something, technically ease of posting something, have been factors that have led us into this position now, where adverts are poor and they're unhelpful to potential candidates and they don't do the job. Are there any other factors you think that lead to poor or disappointing job advertising?
Well, I too remember the press advertising, because we used to have all our adverts going out, maybe not in the Times, but it was the local newspapers. And on a Thursday night, everyone would go and get the newspaper, and you bring it into the office, and then you'd be cutting out opportunities that you could then go and try and canvass. Which is, if you think about how advertising works now, it's crazy, isn't it? I think you're right about cost and barriers to entry. I think the fact that online advertising is so relatively cheap compared to print media, although the costs are going up right now, it's still incredibly cheap compared to an advert, even in the Times Education supplement, for instance. I think there is generally less thought that goes into it. And it's also so easy to do. If you've got Broadbean, or even if you go straight to a job board, you can get an advert live in minutes, and it's incredibly quick. It's almost this kind of disposable nature to it as well. And I know many consultancies who they get to the point of an advert not working, then a week later dive into Broadbean and click on resend without even looking at what's gone wrong, why it's gone wrong. You think, we'll just get it out there again. There's bound to be someone out there who'll find it. Yeah, I think most consultants are aware about the need to optimize. I think the execution's tricky. It takes time. It's probably why people don't do it. And as we said earlier, if you just copy and paste a job set from a client, there's no optimization in it. But yeah, I think it boils down to cost. I think if you advertise offline, you are spending a lot of money. You've got their attention because they're flicking through the pages, and it's not found through a search. So it's more passive than active, I guess. So you have to be more careful about what goes into it.
And I would add 2 other factors. One is, of course, the need for speed. So the thing is, it's creating a sort of self-destructive habit, isn't it? Rushing to be the first person to have posted that job ad is unlikely to get you the results that spending, just a little bit more time will get you. And so it's self-defeating to rush something out that's rubbish. It's also now going to be much more expensive. And I think if we're really honest, though, what it also goes back to is this whole business of resetting the relationship with the client, because a lot of people just struggle to get the information they need to craft a good job advert. I found it helpful when sometimes, trying to persuade clients that they need to speak to me. They can't just email me 8 bullet points. That, I've actually suggested to them that they try going on to job boards and searching themselves for a job in, title, and see just how limiting it is if all you've got is 8 bullet points and you've got nothing to sell the job with, nothing that makes it stand out or bring it to life. Okay, now I'd like to go back and revisit 2 of the things you've already touched on, structure and optimization. So if we can just dig down on structure in a little bit more detail, I think it's possible that our listeners are thinking, you mean write this in the first line, write this in the second line, write this in the third line. So could you just expand a little bit on that?
Yes, I mean, to be completely honest, it probably is a bit of that. There is a science to it. There's an order to it. There's a psychology to it as well. So you're constantly thinking of who is the target hire. We touched on it earlier, but who are they? What do they like? What are their wants? What are their needs? It's how a marketing department would go about creating an advertising campaign. They create marketing personas. They have an idea of who they want to go to. And as a recruiter, you will know in your mind's eye who your target hire is. You'll know probably what they look like, probably how they sound, how the language they use, what their hobbies are. And that's how you've got to try and write an advert. And if you start to treat the advert a bit like a piece of marketing, because that's exactly what it is, then you're going to be on the right track. If you write the advert with them in mind and you're constantly thinking, what's in it for me, and you structure the advert in a way that talks to them and gets them nodding and scrolling, as we said earlier, it's going to make a massive difference. It takes a lot of time and practice, and we cover the structure actually in one of the PDFs he talks about. So we call it the perfect job advert framework. But to quickly go through it, the way we would advocate building a job advert is we have an opening section, which is the bit where you have to engage with them and you have to try and get their interest because you've got 7 seconds before they go and find a different job. Then we'll talk about the job, so what they'll be doing within the role. Then we talk about what you're looking for from the perfect candidate. Then we talk about the package, so what they're going to get paid and how that works for them. Then we talk about the hiring company, so that comes last, doesn't come at the top, it comes last within the advert. And then the final bit, which is a really important bit, is the call to action. So this can bump up response rates by about 7 or 8%, but just by simply asking for someone to send you their CV, something like, if you're interested, send us your CV or apply now, whatever it might be, just something like that as a throwaway line at the bottom. That, again, just finishes the advert off and can make a difference to your overall application rate.
Do you have any thoughts on imposing a deadline for applications?
It's not something we've done in practice because, generally speaking, the job boards, you've got a self-imposed deadline anyway because of the amount of time they'll keep the advert live. So, whether it's 7 days or 28 days, depending on your contract and the job board. I know some clients will have deadlines for dates and, planned interview dates. When we've recruited in the past, we've just been looking for the right person. And I think part of the communication back to the client is trying to control that process. And if they do have deadline dates, and I remember as a recruiter, you try and extend that as much as you can till you find the right person. I'm ambivalent towards that. It doesn't make a huge difference either way.
And what about things like, so I was told early on in my career that you will always get better rates of response if it's to a named individual than to a, info at type address. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, are we talking from an email perspective or? Yeah,
so in the call to action, how to apply, I was always advised that if you make it to alison@recruitmentleadership.co.uk instead of just info at, you will encourage more replies. What do you think about that?
Well, the problem you got with that within the context of a job advert on a job board is that most job boards will strip out any email addresses. So in that instance, if you're advertising on a job board, it would be click the apply button would be the call to action. The job boards are very keen to push you through their system so they can give you metrics on how their advert converted, how many views to applications it got. If you take them offline to an email address, they can't measure that. it's different if you're doing it your own job board or your own website or job board on your own website, because then you can take them off and you can retain control the other way because it doesn't really matter. I think so long as the call to action is targeted and very easy, and there's obviously on a job board the apply button's normally on the right hand side or very close to where the advert is, and you're just guiding them to take the action. And marketers do this all the time. There'll be a call to action: go and do this, go and do that, and it's this kind of subconscious, subtle psychological trick that actually gets a person who's got to the end of the advert thinking, yeah, I'm sending my CV.
Okay, thank you. Now, you mentioned earlier, you said that the ideal structure was engage them first, then describe the job, then describe what you want from the ideal applicant, then the package, and then about the organisation. So I think a lot of our listeners will be surprised to hear that, particularly that positioning of the information about the company. What's the rationale for that?
Because you're thinking about what's in it for me. And a lot of companies who we deal with, a lot of our clients, will invariably start off with, my client is a leading so-and-so, my client does this. And I think they're almost trying to impress the reader that you should come and work for this company. And I personally take the view that human psychology doesn't work that way. And I think they need to know what's in it for them sooner. And I think if they get through those steps of mentally, we were nodding and scrolling, everything's a tick. So they tick, 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 tick. And then by the time they get to the company section, that's the thing that seals the deal. Also, there's not that many companies really that are that appealing that's going to get someone going, yeah, I want to work for them. There's only so many Googles and Coca-Colas and whatever in the world. And the majority of clients that your listeners are going to be recruiting for probably won't be in that field. So to lead with information about a company that probably is going to be quite difficult to dress up for the majority of job ads is quite challenging. So you're trying to get them into thinking, yeah, I am that person. I can do that job. I've got the skills, I've got the qualifications. It's paying me the right amount of money. And you almost kind of want to make the company information almost incidental. It's about making, you're trying to cast, particularly right now, it's so important to cast the net as wide as possible and get as many interested people as possible sending you their CV and giving you the best possible chance of filling the role.
Thank you. Okay, so I think to summarise what you're saying there, if the actual company is the main selling proposition of the opportunity, in other words, it's a world leader, or it's got some fantastic new product development or something like that, then it might be the first thing that you address, because that's how you're going to engage the reader. But otherwise, for most companies don't have that level of brand recognition, and as a recruiter, you probably don't want to give away who they are anyway. So
exactly, I think as well, if you have in your mind's eye, if you as a candidate, if you think I want to go and work for Coca-Cola, whatever, you'd go and look in Coca-Cola's careers pages. So if you think backwards again, if you're searching on total jobs, you start off with a job title, you punch it in, a list of jobs come up, and you'll see generally, obviously, who the recruiter is, the hiring company, and then you'll just go through the job sequentially, trying to find the one that's right for you and sending your CV accordingly. So I think, it's all about thinking about how a user works in that process. And I think they're looking for things that best suit their circumstances, their requirements. They want to know whether they're working in an office 5 days a week, whether there's flexible working, what the benefits are, what it pays them, and can they do the job. So it's this constant thinking of what's in it for me and just putting yourself in their shoes.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier a cliche that arouses strong opinions, the recruitment phrase, my client is. So I'm going to push you on this one. Yes or no?
I honestly, I don't think it really matters that much. I think we see the company section as adding a bit of colour to the advert. It's about getting people over the line. So hopefully you've gotten to the point of thinking, yeah, that's perfect, I can do that. And then you're looking at reasons why someone should work for that company. And then you put that in there. So people work for this company because they empower their individuals to do this. They work out of state-of-the-art offices, whatever it might be. I'm not sure matters massively how you phrase that, because again, it's towards the bottom. If it's the first thing you mention in an advert, it becomes super important how you phrase it. And to be honest, the whole "my client is a market leading blah blah blah" for me is really beige and vanilla and would turn me off and wouldn't get me engaged in the whole thing. And I've seen that 1,000 times before, and it wouldn't stand out. So I wouldn't include it personally, but I don't think it makes a massive difference if it's lower down the advert.
Okay, all right, thank you. Now, you mentioned earlier about the importance of getting as many relevant people as possible and widening your net, which brings us neatly around to the whole issue of diversity and inclusion. So I know lots and lots of recruiters have great intentions about this, but they often lack actions to give themselves the most diverse, selection of candidates. And I think it's fair to say that very often they probably address the whole issue better with clients if they could describe what actions they themselves take. So thinking again here about not just advert copy, but also practicing where and when and so forth that you place them. What can we do to encourage the widest possible diversity and inclusion?
I think as a recruiter, I think you're right. I think it's difficult to actually demonstrably prove that you can support a client with being more inclusive with their hiring. I think it's a tricky thing. More and more companies are demanding that their agencies are doing or proving they can do something. I know there's a publishing company with one of our clients, and they have gone to them with a new set of terms, 30 pages long. These terms are 5 of these pages are dedicated to D&I. And what they're expecting the agency now to do in terms of getting through that and making sure they're on the right side of the D&I line. It's very difficult. I think that I'm coming at this from an advertising perspective. One of the most obvious routes where a company could prove that they can support you in being more inclusive is to remove any unconscious bias or any prejudice or any gender-coded or exclusionary language that exists within a job advert. We actually built a D&I tool into AdBuilder to do exactly that, actually, and we called it AdGrader. But the thinking behind it is that everybody has a degree of unconscious bias within them, and they in their language and the things they say, they probably won't know that words they're using are feminine coded, masculine coded, but there's so much research and so many stats to prove if you've got a heavily feminine coded advert, you'll put men off applying and vice versa. You could be stopping people or making people deselect themselves just by like a subconscious narrative that's going in their head based on the words you're using. So to be able to prove that you eliminate these words, these potential blockers, I think that's a great BD tool, actually. You can go back to your clients and say, look, this is what we do. This is how we do it. You'll win more new business. And in fact, I know one client of ours who she goes through total jobs and she's targeting companies she wants to work with. So she'll get their advert off, so end employer advert, and she puts them into AdGrader, and she shows them a before and after, so with an inclusivity score and a readability score, and she'll say, this is what your advert was before, and this is what I've done to it afterwards. Can we talk? And so she's sort of proactively targeting these companies who are pushing hard for D&I, but then showing them that their advert, in fact, has got an inclusivity score of 55%, and then she can massively improve it and demonstrate how it works. So I think there's a big angle recruiters can take with this. Not many recruiters are on top of this right now as well. I think they're slow to be aware of it, and I think if the companies that do something about it this year, in fact, I think they'll leap a march on many of their competitors, and they'll position themselves as the agency to do business with. So they'll be able to go to companies and say, look, this is how we can do or help your D&I objectives and goals. And they'll probably end up getting on more PSLs and getting more roles as a result. So yeah, I think this year is a big year for D&I. I think it's massively important.
Yes, I mean, it really doesn't wash anymore, does it, to say we support, we do everything we can. People want to know what you're doing to support a diverse candidate list. And there was another point I wanted to add here. Yes, I know. I read some research, and I cannot for the life of me remember who it was from. And it was about some of how the phrasing of some of your inclusivity statements will massively affect the actual number of applications from the underrepresented groups. Now, the example that stuck in my mind was you can either put a little, a standard line on the bottom of an advert that says such and such is an equal opportunities employer, for example, which frankly isn't worth the space it's written on, because by law you have to be an equal opportunities employer, yeah. And what that message tells the average reader is that this organisation is out of date. They're box ticking. They're not really actively looking for diversity and inclusion. And they compared it, and they'd actually run, a like-for-like controlled test. They compared it to where someone put a very natural language message that said something along the lines of, hey, we know that in the past we haven't seen enough candidates from ethnic minorities, whatever it might be, or people with disabilities, and we are really keen to encourage you to apply. It won't be used as a reason to appoint people, so it actually said something that sounded genuine and meaningful.
I can believe that. I think it makes a difference. I think, one thing that's taught me, we launched the AdGrader platform in August last year, and we spent about 3 or 4 months building it out. And the more work we did in it, the more research we did in it, and the more we found the studies and from Harvard and from wherever, which backed everything up. Just from a commercial point of view, it actually makes a massive difference to the number of applications you receive. So even if you perhaps as a recruiter don't fully buy into the whole concept of D&I and gender coded language, and does it really make a difference? It does make a difference. And obviously it's great to be seen as a recruiter with a conscience, because I think that's going to really help with companies you're targeting from a BD perspective. But in the ability for you to go and fill roles and make more placements and make more money ultimately, which is what most recruiters want to do, then it does make a difference, because it's this internal narrative that someone's got in their head. They don't even know that they're having this narrative and conversation, but it's happening, and they're deselecting themselves from an advert just because of the language that you're using. So I can totally take on board what you're saying about the difference between those two statements and the impact that could have.
You've mentioned, some of the features of AdBuilder, which sound really intriguing. Before we explain to people how to get in contact with you, what evidence have you got from recruiters that using AdBuilder can actually increase the quantity and quality of the response?
Well, I mentioned it earlier. We've got a really good video on our homepage, and I'd encourage everyone to go and have a look at it. It's agencies.adbuilder.io, and it shows the optimization in practice. And it was the senior recruitment consultant role, and there was something like 2,900 results, and it just shows you the ability of AdBuilder to get you high up the rankings. I think what AdBuilder will do for recruiters, what it does do for recruiters, it gets you in the shop window. I think the shop window is the most important part initially. So assuming you've got the right job title, and we've talked about that already, but assuming you've got the right job title and you've used AdBuilder, it'll be optimized. You'll be in the top 3 or 4 spots for that particular job search. So you're going to be there. We obviously can't control the salary that someone's paying. We can't control the perks and benefits within the job. And our ability to split test job ads within job boards, it doesn't happen. So unfortunately, I can't physically prove that advert A is better than advert B because the job boards don't allow it. But anecdotally, and also from the feedback we get from our clients, they see fill rates go up by around about 165% after using AdBuilder. So we see higher levels of revenue. We see that there's an average of 3 extra candidates per advert shortlist. So we have a lot of anecdotal proof from our recruitment agency clients who turn around and say, yeah, it's made a massive difference. But what I would desperately love is the ability for a job board to say, just split test a job ad. And then we could go and show it, because as I say, this solved our problem. So we know this works going back 10, 15 years. And we've just moved that across into the wider area.
Right. Okay. So split testing, and you know what? Even if the job boards don't allow it, worth doing on your own website and job search, isn't it? Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. So we've mentioned about the various PDFs that you've created that will give people, who may or may not want to look further into subscribing to AdBuilder, but this is just great free stuff that James has made available. So once again, James, where can the listeners download this stuff?
Well, if you just head to adbuilder.io/bundle, that's adbuilder.io/bundle. It's there's 4 PDFs in there. They're all the frameworks that we used back in the day to actually go and build a really good job advert, and they're all the frameworks that underpin everything that AdBuilder does. So whether you use AdBuilder or not, if you just go and take the lessons from these PDFs and go and do it for yourself, it will make a massive difference to your advertising and how you recruit. So yeah, just head over there and download it.
Okay, so thank you. That's a fantastic free resource, and I've got these documents myself, and I really can recommend them. And of course, you can, from the website, you can pick up directly with James if you want to look more at the product AdBuilder. So James, many thanks for a fascinating and really actionable podcast today. And I'm Alison Humphries. Anyone who's listening, this is part of a series about candidate shortages and what you can do about them, which I hope will add to your understanding and profitability ultimately. But it is part of the picture. So if you're looking for board advisory or executive coaching that actually looks at the whole of your business, please get in contact with me, Alison at recruitmentleadership.co.uk. James Ball of AdBuilder, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Alison.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, review and share so that others can find the podcast too. We really appreciate your support. If you have any questions about the topics covered or wish to find out more about recruitment leadership, please email Alison at recruitmentleadership.co.uk, referencing the podcast. We're also on LinkedIn, where you can follow Recruitment Leadership and connect with Alison Humphries. Thank you for listening, and we hope you join us next time for another episode of the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.